text linearly. And that's why it becomes frustrating, because then you say, what was that word? And then, of course, when you think of that, you have already missed, like the next 5 words. And they rely on comprehension based on words, based on sort of sentences. But listening, as we discussed earlier, has different features because it's a spoken language. So we need to give the students strategies. We need to provide them with different tools, okay? So bottom-up strategies are good, especially for beginners. They are good depending on what the aim of the lesson is, but it's not everything. Listening, it's not just the bottom-up processing. And basically, it's not just bottom-up because we have the counterpart. We have the top-down. We have everything that is in our minds, everything that we know about the world, everything that we know about the language, the system, everything we know about a situation. Everything then interacts with this bottom-up processing. But again, they are not independent processes. It's not just relying on bottom-up or now let's move on to top-down and let's do just top-down processing. Again, we could, depending on the level of the students, depending on the task that we want them to address, but in general, especially if we're thinking about developing the skill, we need to see these 2 processes as a sort of a machine that, where they interact. Sometimes the emphasis might be on bottom-up, but top-down will be there anyway. And then perhaps the emphasis will be on the other side, and bottom-up will be less important. But what we need to understand is that both are at play every time we do listening activity. And again, here we have important concepts that we need to bear in mind. Schema, which is everything we know. It's everything we know about the world. Frame, it's how that information is organized. The script, sort of the order in which things are done. And the scenario, the context, okay? And here I have an example. For example, a restaurant event. We may give students a listening activity, a dialogue at a restaurant where, 2 people walk into the restaurant, they sit down, choose from the menu, blah, 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 ask for the bill, etc. But what if our students have never experienced a restaurant situation in their lives? So the listening becomes difficult, not necessarily because they don't understand the language, but because they cannot really make sense out of what is happening there. It's like sort of, at the airport. Yes, it makes sense if you've been at the airport. But if you have never experienced that, it's difficult to sort of organize your ideas and face the listening process successfully because you don't have anything in your mind to build upon. So you're relying exclusively on bottom-up. But at the end of the day, bottom-up will not be enough, and students will say, well, I didn't understand much. Because it's not just knowing that a ticket is a ticket, but what the ticket entitles you to do when you are flying, for example. So that's another important concept. And again, it's repeated again and again when we talk about genre, when we talk about context, when we talk about discourse in a way. Okay, the interactive model is like the combination of the 2, okay, where language is processed simultaneously at different levels. And it allows for the possibility of individual variation in linguistic processing. I may know a lot about sort of the restaurant scenario, so I will rely a lot on my top-down. My bottom-up will be less important. But if there is someone, perhaps the person sitting next to me, who has a different experience, probably he or she will have to rely more on bottom-up. So when you have this concept in mind, when you know as a teacher, and then if the students understand that these two concepts are at play, then of course the individual variations will actually allow for better comprehension than because we are not supposed to do the same processing. If we are 45 people in the classroom, it means that there will be 45 different levels of processing between these two concepts. How can we develop this? Well, the scaffolding, which has to do with preparing students to successfully handle the task that they are given, and basically by explicitly working with both bottom-up and top-down strategies. Okay, the first 2 points have been covered, and now I would like to sort of move on to the next one, which is, I think, the new element here, the pedagogical model for second language listening. And basically, the ideas and the concepts are by no means mine, okay? They have been taken from the book called A Pedagogical Model for Language Listening, for Second Language Listening by Flower, Dew, and Miller, 2005. The bibliographical references are at the end of the presentation. Flower, Dew, and Miller states dimensions of listening. They are all there, and again, as you can see at the center there, the core is this dual processing, this integrated or interactive processing, top-down and bottom-up. But they also include a number of other concepts. Basically, I'm going to address the ones which have been highlighted: the social dimension, the affective dimension, and the contextualized dimension. The social dimension. Listening in the context of conversation is a social activity. Both the speaker and listener affect the nature of the message. So when we think of listening, it's not just the recorded material. Listening is the interaction that we have as teachers with the students and the interaction that we should allow among the students as well. Because if we allow for that interaction, then we're providing students with the opportunities of being exposed to the features of the spoken languages. It's then when they can negotiate meaning. It's then when they are given the possibility of making mistakes and start again, or correct pronunciation problems, etc. A second dimension is the contextualized one. And here, and I'm going to read this bit, which is taken from the book, it says listeners are likely to process spoken texts in the context of other texts. In other words, integrating their skills. If listening is presented in isolation, just listening activities where you answer true or false, or where you complete sentences, then learners are forced to learn in ways which are not natural. You listen because someone is talking to you. You listen because whatever the information that is being conveyed is important to you. If the information is not important, then you don't listen. So here we have the challenge. And thirdly, we have the affective dimension. Comprehension can only take place if individuals are motivated to listen. Very strong statements, okay? Then Matthewson is quoted in the book that I mentioned, and he suggests 4 affective factors: attitude, motivation, which has to do with the desire to know. I mean, I want to listen because I want to know something, not because I have to answer 10 questions. The affect, feelings, okay, that the teacher may provoke, situations that may stem out of the discussion, out of the pre-listening, perhaps, stage that we usually engage in when we do listening comm activities or reading comm activities. And also